Click here to start streaming. Alright. Going live. Here we are. Alright. It's actually working. As if there's anyone watching right now, just can you get back at me a thumbs up? Does it sound good? Can you hear me? Is everything peachy? I'm just clicking around, making sure. Oh, we have one viewer. Good evening. Two viewers. There we go. Can you guys hear me? Can somebody, you can chat, put it in the chat. Went live and talking about mastering today. Sort of a little bit about how to get better results or how to prepare your songs to master, and also a little bit of what not to do or send. I hope you're all doing good today, having a good time, enjoying your Sunday, wherever you may be. And I'm just gonna yap for a little bit, make sure whoever actually wants to see this gets online to check it out. Obviously, this stream will be available on this channel after I'm done. But if you want to get at me live and ask questions as I am talking, go for it. Just say something in the chat and let's answer some questions. Because trust me, I wish I had this ability or the possibility for gaining knowledge and information back in the day before YouTube and internet and all that. So if there's anything I say today can help you or someone making music or in the business, then it's a win-win for all. Sharing knowledge and information. Speaking of, gotta have a little bit more coffee. I'm just gonna start the combo here. Hi and welcome. If you have any questions, why am I speaking as I'm typing? There. All right, so mastering. As you can see, I have a couple of songs loaded up. It's a remix I did not too long ago. Figured it would be a good example to like visually also show what sort of happens. And I will talk about this pretty much from like a noob perspective, if you may. Like, if you don't know anything, you'll get something out of it. If you've been doing this for a while, maybe there's still some useful information for you. And yeah, please do tell me where in the world you are. Always cool to see where people are from. Adrian Adex, hello. How's it going, Adrian? I actually have a cousin named Adrian and a friend. Adrian, good name. Okay, I'll just start and we'll go from there. So, mastering. Let me just first talk about the difference between mastering and mixing and production. Mastering is the final step before your songs or album, whatever, gets manufactured, duplicated into CD, or these days like uploaded to stream sites. It's like the final stage. Unlike mixing and production, which is a whole different ballgame. I've seen some cases where people think mastering is kind of like mixing, but honestly it really isn't. It's a whole different thing. I mean, sure, it gets a bit blurry when you start talking stem mastering, but I will leave that for another day. Let's just focus on your good old-fashioned mastering. So I'll start by telling you a story from back in the day when I started on this journey of music with the band Icon of Coil. Poland, na zdrowie, jak się masz? Mój Polski is, yeah, my Polish isn't that good. I know some stuff, but yeah. So, back in the day when Icon of Coil, we finished, I believe that was the EP that came first. I remember being so excited going to an actual mastering place and, totally expecting to come back from that with the song sounding like everything else does on the radio, like super perfect and magical, and Was that the case when I put the CD in the car on the way back from mastering? Nope. It was anything but magical stuff. I was actually quite disappointed, to be honest, because somehow in my head I expected, after mastering, it's gonna sound badass. Like that's what mastering is for. Well, not really. Because mastering does, any problems in your mix, any frequency masking, or a little bit of poorly balanced mixes, that potentially will actually get even worse in mastering because everything gets brought up. So even those little things in the background, suddenly they're in your face. So so mastering isn't like this magical please save my song type of thing. It's actually almost like a revealing type of situation where any potential issues will most certainly come out in the mastering. I mean, this can be a subjective thing too, of course, so I'm just trying to be as neutral as possible. So, how do you get a great master? Well, besides hiring someone that does great mastering and understands your vision, understands your type of music, know sort of what it should sound like, that obviously is a good start. However, a great master starts with a great mix. And to get a great mix, I mean, I could talk about that for like days, but what you need to look out for is make sure your low end, like say 100 hertz and below, should be in mono, like unless there's a breakdown, you got some crazy cool effects going on, that's obviously the exception. But your low end needs to, like if your low end is not jiving, you're gonna run into troubles pretty fast. So basically your kick drum, this translates to most genres. Obviously some genres this might not be so much of an issue, but like generally speaking, music that has bass, that has drums, that has a bunch of instruments, make sure your kick and your bass sound, or sub bass, depends on your genre, they have to be really good friends. Like if your bass and your kick are not tight, it's just going to ruin pretty much everything else. And then you start turning up the kick, it's not coming through, and next thing you know, you're just blowing up your whole mix. Trust me, I've done plenty of that myself back, even sometimes these days, but I'm more aware of those problems and make conscious decisions to avoid that. Obviously, I'm more of a problem in like super dense mixes, which we hear a lot of these days, where it's just massive amounts of sounds like coming at you all the time. Yeah, that's why I feel like hip hop, for instance, sounds really good usually, like so clear and so punchy. Excuse me. That's because there isn't a lot of instruments fighting. Like everything is very methodically placed. You have one bass sound, one kick. You know what I mean? So, where was I? Yeah. So, low end, important. This is where sidechaining can come in, and don't like cringe when you hear sidechaining, because it's not always the typical EDM pumpy kind of thing. It can be used very creatively, and in fact, one of my favorite mixing techniques is to do sidechaining. Often not in a sense that you hear it so much, but it does help a lot in your mix, especially a dense mix. You can, like I've done stuff like sidechaining guitars to the lead vocal. So when the lead vocal, like especially in the chorus, comes in, you want the vocal to, be there. So you'd sidechain a little bit of 1.5 to 3K on the guitar. So when the vocal is in, the guitar will go down in volume just in that frequency range. I mean, if it's noticeably, maybe you went too far, but little things like that. Or a hi-hat, say you have a really crispy little hi-hat, those 808 hi-hats or something like that going on, and there's also, say, guitars or some buzzy synth. Sometimes, again, you have to make the decision, what is the important element at this point. But you have the hi-hat sidechaining the buzzy sound a little bit. So whenever there's a hi-hat, it will duck other sounds. This you can do with, low end, and it can be very effective. Sort of clear out the way of your instruments. And of course, what is that? Well, that's a decision you have to make. I'd like to think most vocal songs, the vocal really should, be there. If you're making a dance track or, some kind of groovy stuff, you obviously want your drums to pop out too. So, yeah, kind of went into mixing a bit here, but these are like a few good steps to take in order to deliver a balanced mix to be mastered. Because to give you an example, what could happen, say you get a file to master, and this is, I speak from experience, like I'm talking about actual real life scenarios that I have dealt with over the years. And sometimes you get a mix in a song and it's just booming. There's so much low end, like 40 hertz, 30 hertz is just blowing up like crazy. And when you master, like suddenly you can't get the level because lower frequencies take most of your, the space in terms of volume. I don't know. I don't talk super technical, so you have to excuse me if you're like, dude, that's not what it's called. I don't care. I'm talking the way I talk, so it's just the way it is. So if you send something that has like super heavy low end, in order to like balance that out from a mastering perspective, then you're gonna be it's like a kind of a win some lose some battle. Okay, so you bring down the sub, but how far can you go and then suddenly lose, that sub? So yeah, balanced mix. It's a very interesting. It's a game in a sense. Like I use the reference, like those plate balancing people where they have plates on sticks, kind of like at the end of a mix. It kind of feels like that. You got to keep balancing all your plates. Could be a metaphor for life too, if you want to. So yeah, a little bit about how to achieve a good mix. I should talk about phase. Now, phase is something I used to laugh about because, I don't know, starting this journey in music, I thought phase that's something you deal with when you're like miking up like live drums or two microphones on your guitar cabinet. Back then I never thought phase was something I had to consider, right? Boy, was I wrong. I cringe on some of my older mixes. I'm just like, oh man, if I just flicked a couple of phase switches, the mix will just boop. What I mean by phase or polarity, some people call it, it's a very simple thing. Most DAWs, I believe, these days have a phase switch. And let's see, I'll show you here quickly. So here in Cubase, it looks like this letter here, right there. See that? So you flick that, you flip the phase off that channel. What that does, especially in the low end, is because often, there's a lot of information down there, 30, 40, 50, up to 200 hertz. You got your kicks, sometimes your snare, synth sounds, some guitar, especially if you layer like bass with a synth bass, and like you got to watch out for that stuff. Because the feeling you get is like, where's the bass? It's not, and you keep turning it up, but it's not really happening. Red flag, phase issues. Check that. Just, all you have to do is just flick the phase, and suddenly you'll like, whoa, there's the bass, or whoa, suddenly it sounds better. Like it's very noticeable. Like there's no question when you flick it and it sounds better, off you go. So test that with your kicks and bass. Sometimes flick the phase on your kick, sometimes flick the phase on your bass sound or a couple of bass sounds. Even with vocals, like say backing vocals, sometimes you flick the phase there and suddenly they're like, whoa. So yeah, don't forget that. Check that like in the end. Or as you mix, like I do. I mix sort of as I go along too, because somehow I like to quickly get to the end result. Otherwise it doesn't feel right. But that's, subjective. You mix how you want to. And again, don't forget, if you have any questions, just fire off a message here. I'll answer it to my best abilities. And anyway, so I should dig into the topic here. Let's look on my list. So yeah, great master starts with a great mix. And now I'll talk to when you send your mix to be mastered. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while without rage. Because sometimes I'm just getting stuff and I'm just like, no, can't help you. And ironically, those people who do it the wrong way, dare I say wrong, because it is, they complain about the mastering. That's the irony of the situation. So allow me to clarify some things, and hopefully we'll start. Oops, I'm just moving my camera by accident. Get some better mixes. So the reason I got these two files up here is so I'm going to have a little bit of a visual representation of what I mean. It's going to make this smaller. Fuck, I got to get a camera out of the way. There. So you see the red one is a mastered mix. The yellow one is not. Same song. So look at the red one. If I get that sent, like, hey, can you master my song? I'll be like, sure, but I can't really do much because you've already just squashed the shit out of your song. So your dynamics are already gone. And if you just throw a limiter on because that's what you feel you have to do, don't. I mean, by all means, when you're working on it and you want to hear how it sounds, fucking go for it. But when you're done and when you're going to send it, don't send the red one. Send the yellow one. No limiter on, no crazy, insane compression. Like if you, like me, sometimes you put on like a saturation plugin because it helps glue your mix. You know, it gets the vocal like really shining and low end gets just slammed into position, so to speak. Do that if that's part of the sound. Oops. If that's part of the sound, but don't send me that red thing. Like or any mastering engineer out there or whoever does mastering for you, don't send them that. Where it's just going 2-0, done. Can't do anything. And sometimes I have, because either the artist can't get hold of the original file or there's like a crazy deadline and people are, on a vacation or whatever, so you just have to work with that. Well, you do what you can, but rule number one, as far as I'm concerned, don't send a file that's slammed by a limiter. Not a good idea at all. Ever. Never, ever, ever, ever do that. Please. I beg you, please don't send a file that looks like the red one. That it's not good. The yellow one, awesome. I had a question about how loud should it be? Well, from my perspective, it doesn't matter as long as it's not looking like the red one. If it's minus 1 dB, whatever. If it's minus 7 dB, fine. I say usually minus 4 or 5 dB is a sweet spot. It doesn't really matter as long as it's not clipping. It's not as long as it's not just crushed to shit. So that's a big thing, especially to you who I didn't like the way the masters sound. Well, you know what? Next time, send a song that has its dynamics intact and that isn't just a sausage. All right? Trust me, it doesn't benefit your situation or mine for that matter. So, yeah. General rule: check your low end, check your phase. Try to keep anything below 100, 150 hertz in mono. It does sound punchier too. Often what I do in mastering, if I hear that there's stuff going on down there in stereo, I take a high pass filter on the side only and just bring it up. And just doing that, I can suddenly hear the song like, boom, there's the punch. Sort of clear out some random low end. And, I should bring this up in a mixing process. Like, say your song is done, all the instruments are there, and go through instruments. Because when I do mix for people, I sometimes see that. Some sounds have this crazy peak, like 30 hertz, 20 hertz, just booming up. And although you might not hear it, depending on your room, your speakers, 20, 30, 40 tracks with some weird low end stuff going on that literally doesn't need it at all. Guess what happens when you try to master that? You bet. Just low end, just it's just not good. Like hi-hat sounds, don't leave shit below 200, 300. I mean, it depends a little bit on the pitch and stuff, but always check your files, like vocal files. You don't need stuff down in 40, 50 hertz. Like, that's crazy. Unless, of course, it's a very specific effect or a vocoder or something. But generally speaking, even guitars, like, I've gotten some stuff where there's like from 40 to 0 is just like this massive chunk, like, ruined the mix. I just fixed that and suddenly the song sounds $1,000,000, like $1,000,000. Like, it's crazy. So often it's not a big dramatic change you need to do, but a few minor changes here and there would significantly improve your mix and your mastering. What else could you do? I know people talk a lot about like reference tracks. Listen to reference tracks. Although I like the idea of it, and definitely if you're kind of new into this, I definitely would say use reference tracks to kind of get in the ballpark of what you're looking for. Then again, I also like to be like anti-reference tracks here because, yeah, but get your own sound. Like, how do you, back in the day, all the classics, all the albums, like, find your own sound, find your own vibe. I feel maybe that's a bit of a problem these days, why so many things sound the same, because people are using reference tracks. Like, it doesn't help you stand out, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So use them if you need to, but okay, I'm just answering a question here. Can we hear the yellow one and have you comment on what about it makes it master ready? Sure. Okay, yeah, so I'll play a section of the master one. I'll put this guy so you can see what's going on. And yeah, just play a little bit of each so you can like see the difference. I'll start, say, here, so you don't get your heads blown off. And then I'll explain a little bit. I should mention, this is a remix I did for the band 11 Grams. The song is called Iceman.
Ready for cloning process.
Play the unmastered one. Obviously a volume difference. Compare like a little bit back and forth quickly. Master. And I didn't master it that loud. I mean, I'm sure somebody listening now, like, that's loud. Yeah. Guess what? Willing, if you want it or not, you gotta sort of compete. Actually, I will talk more about that, like levels and shit. What was the question about? What makes it master ready? Well, I'm in a situation where I tend to master my own stuff, and that's a double-edged English. It's a double-edged sword. Wow, that was hard. Um, the good thing is if you like start mastering and you start hearing, oh, there's a problem, well, you can quickly just go back into the mix and fix it, and so that's kind of the benefit. The downside is you've heard, you know everything about the song, right? So it's hard to be neutral. You kind of biased because you can tell, you know where everything is, and so if you can like detach as a artist when you master and like try to be as neutral as possible, then you're good to go. Because again, you can quickly go back and forth between mixes to fix it in the mastering stage. I do that a lot. Like I listen to the masters and then I render it out and then I listen to it and have a notepad or something and just start, oh, this song has that snare didn't feel right, or the vocals are too sharp, or la 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 la. So then I go back into the mixes, fix that, and re-render it out. So in a sense, you could reach a better end result by mastering yourself. But, and also, you know, saves time. It's always about time, deadlines and shit. So hope that answered your questions. What made it master ready? Well, maybe I should dig in, open the actual. Would you guys want to see the actual session file of that remix? The difference is, you know, a few things, but let's see the levels here. The unmastered one is. Well, it's peaking about minus 16 LUFS. Loudness unit something something. Which is not that far from the so-called recommended streaming levels. However, if you sent that to manufacture, your song would sound way lower in volume. And as much as you don't want to admit that, and even myself, like, for the first little while when you hear a song, if it's louder, you kind of get the better impression. And honestly, you don't want to be that band where in a playlist or on Spotify or whatever, your song comes on and it's like noticeably less in volume. Not that cool, right? So the so-called loudness war, even though it's kind of fading, but find a middle, or you can master 2-3 different versions, like one loud as fuck, one more, you know, chill. But time, budgets, mastering ready. I almost want to say what makes it master ready. Well, because it is done. Hang on, let me just check something. Do I have it still here? Yeah. All right, I'm gonna load up the actual session for the song. I hope the band 11 Grams don't mind. Go check them out. 11 Grams. So let's just check that out. And that way you can see, in this case, I actually did the master like sort of in Cubase. So you can see the whole thing. And if you have any questions about the mix, I can show you. Just let Cubase load it. Missing files, yes. All right, so here we are. This is the actual session file. Clearly nothing going on there. Start with the drums. Okay. Hang on. Let me just, oh yeah, I fixed that. Shoot. Hang on, just loading some plugins. I can kind of show you what I do in my mastering chain, although, you know, subjective. Whatever works for you works for you. I tend to tell people, like, don't overthink things too much. It could be simple, but it could also be complicated. Now this bad boy, I put that on pretty much every master or mix I do. It's what's it called? HG2, the black box, and saturation, very very beautiful saturation, and it just gels your mix. Just sounds freaking awesome. Okay, I'm just gonna make sure I turn everything on here. So check for questions. All right, cool. Okay, so in terms of mixing, like how to, of course, I didn't do that with this one. Goes to show though, there's no one way of doing things. Like it's so program dependent. Like what I do 80% of the time, suddenly I don't at all on some other situations. Apparently I didn't do buzzes here, like drum buzz or anything. Anyway, all right. So I can show you what I've got on the master bus. Let me just loop a section here. Where does the fun begin? Here. Okay, so this mix, I still mix a bit loud sometimes, so I put some trimmers on, but this is the first in my mastering chain. Actually, what did I do here? That is... Sometimes I look at what I did, I'm like, what the flip was I thinking? Usually I wouldn't put that on, or that. Hang on, let me just improve on myself on the fly, on the spot. Yeah. Oh yeah, I know I have two trimmers, because one of them I automate, which is a trick to get more energy in your song. It's to, like, when there's like a drop or a chorus, you bring it up a couple of dB, because in the mastering it's just gonna feel loud, like, whoa, there is the chorus. So a dB up or down throughout your mix, like on your master out, it's another like final step to make your mix song sound more dynamic. Versus bring down a dB chorus, bring up a dB, and the last chorus maybe dB and a half, 2 dB. So it kind of slowly builds momentum. Oh, one of those little tricks. So yeah, first chain. I know what you're thinking. Look, it's going peaking. Yeah, it's good. Like this is like an analog modeling thing, so it gives you that fatness, crunch, a little bit of EQ, 10.6 hertz and up, a couple of dBs. Nothing else going on. I tend to like this preset full mix glue, and then just kind of adjust a little bit. So that's the first one. Second guy is, well, there's an updated version now, but EQ, SSL EQ, boosted, a bit of low end, a little bit around 3.4, and a cut down a bit around 7.4. I mean, these are different every time, so sometimes there's nothing happening there. So that's the second one, and the third. Put this guy. I like this preset. Again, I always fine tune it a bit, but it kind of compresses your mids mostly. So that kind of just helps it along, and of course this guy is the big player. I love this as a like on vocals. Like if you want a little bit distortion, like this is such a high-end distortion. Like it's the most awesome thing. It can be very subtle, or it can just destroy all sounds ever on it. You'll definitely hear a big difference when I turn this on and off. And the mix of it is 44%. Sometimes I leave it on 100, but it depends on the song. Again, 43, whatever. So I leave it on and then I turn it off, and you can be like, oh. So you hear how everything just kind of like becomes friends, like elements in your mix, sounds kind of gel together. Because what it does, it adds harmonic distortion, right? So you get a fuller sounding mix. And often this is the trick also to get a louder sounding mix, or what is called perceived loudness. So it's not literally louder, but it feels louder. Distortion is good for that. And of course I can take this far, but yeah, I'll show you how far I can go with it. Okay. And the trick too, sometimes, like say you can crunch it a bit more and you just bring the mix back. Just hear how the low end just like sounds so juicy. Now I'm over this exaggerating, but there are cases in my world anyway where a little bit of that saturation is always awesome. But yeah, bring it down for this case. And then this plugin has a really cool air thing, sort of like an EQ, I guess. Gives you a little bit of that shine. It opens up your mix a bit if you need to do that. So that's in there, and then some final corrective EQ. Like you see down here, I don't need all that. Like this whole chunk here, you don't need that. And this will also eat up your headroom, so it's not gonna get as loud. And of course, final is FabFilter Pro L2. Such a great limiter. Yeah, especially with the new one, the L2. It's got these cool new modes: aggressive, modern, buzz, safe. Just if you don't have this one, get it if you can, man. It's gonna help you out. But do learn it too, because it can get a bit iffy sometimes. So here is where the final gain happens, right? As you can see, I boosted it almost 8 dB. Let's do 8 just for simplicity there. And watch your head. So yeah, it's peaking about minus 7.5 LUFS. I usually lay around there, minus 8-ish, give or take. Again, depends a little bit on the song too. Like some more mellow type of songs, I don't like mellow songs to be as loud, but you know, say you have an album with some punchy dance tracks mixed with some chill songs, and again, there is the dichotomy. You got to find the balance, find the sweet spot. Because I always say, does it have to be so loud? I mean, we all have volume knobs, right? So, but again, if you listen to yourself as like a part of a playlist, to check that, you can sometimes just put a bunch of songs and one of your songs in there and just put it on. When you see when your song comes on, does it like feel like, oh crap? Yeah. So that's the mastering chain on this specific song. So again, starting with some slate mix rack, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of gluing compression, A little bit more of EQ. I guess I felt this song needed a bit of low end mixed in. A little bit of mid-range compression to glue, get it smacking. And this beauty here, saturation, and wow, a little bit of final EQ. Actually, I'm turning off and on the saturation. You can see how this high hiss from something changes. Harmonics, beautiful thing. And of course, the limiter. Sometimes I have less. Sometimes you get mixes or your own songs that you don't need EQ. That's another thing with mastering, or like, don't put things on because you feel you have to. Like, you gotta sort of always listen for. You gotta ask yourself, do I need to put that on? It's easy to just do things by default, which can often be not a good idea. Hope that answers your question. Are you using Crash on Kick? When I get a song to mix, I mean, in a perfect world, to get the song like this, just you open it up and everything is, like this one is. That would be ideal. However, that only works out if A, you got the same DAW, B, you got the same plugins. More often than not, that never tends to be the case. So, yeah, I always ask for stems. Just from bar 1 till whatever, to the end of the song. And if you have any specific plugins on your tracks, then render with that on. Vocals, though, I do prefer them dry. I mean, if you have the reverb or a delay or something like that on them, you can just render out the reverbs and delays as a separate file. So when I mix it, I can, do stuff to it to improve the results, the final results. So, yeah, stems just seem to make more sense. Unless, of course, you're working with someone who has the same DAW and the same plugins, then sure, send it like this. But more often than not, you run into some kind of issues, like plugin not supported, or missing plugin, or missing something. So, stems. Are you using Crash on Kick? I'm not sure. Oh, you mean in the song? In this? Now I'm hearing the kick and it's kind of sounding distorted here. I tend to layer kicks. Okay, let me. Fuck, I gotta move this camera and I have to move my head. Crash on Kick. Hang on, let me just cycle a smaller part of the song. There. Okay, so this is what's going on the drums. Here's the main kick without all the plugins on it. Hang on. You can hear it gets a bit more. I'm using this drum strip from SSL. Great on drums. A little bit of transient shaper. And then kick LTE, which by itself sounds like this. However, I have, took out a lot of low end from it. Probably in here too, yeah. But I didn't want the low end from it. I just wanted the character from this kick to kind of help the other one along. And then there's a hi-hat. Another hi-hat. 608. 608. 606. On the hi-hat, I used quite a bit of tape saturation because it kind of gives you that attitude. Filthier sounding. Clank snare, I call this. It's like an anvil sound or something. one snare. And another snare. And some kind of offbeat sound. And then there's a ride on the offbeat. And then there's another ride on the onbeat, which is, I believe, your question. So it's not a crash. Well, it is a crash symbol, but the ride, ding, the bell. And I do have a crash on the downbeat. Knowing myself, though, I'm sure there's a part where the crash goes. I do that frequently. There's like a part where like a drop where all the energy is in there. Yeah, I definitely do the crash on like. Sometimes side chaining it, so it's like. It adds excuse my language, but it adds a lot of fucking energy to your song. If, you know, that's what you're after. Let's see what else is going on here. So that's the drums. Let's see what else we got going on here. Oh, yeah, I got this. Let me just check this out. Fuck, my mouse is being bad. See, it's just like shifting on its own. Let's see here. I like playing with vocals, like when I'm remixing. Just make little riffs and little catchy, little cool licks from vocal sounds. I just go through the vocal, the verse, chorus, whatever, find little words or parts of words, syllables, vowels, you name it. Show you a little bit about the bass sound too, if you want. Nothing crazy.